is no longer bismuth. This is mechabismuth. The Khan has ordered us to mechanize, so we took off the pantaloons. I come from the future. The actors outside the stage. The actors who have not yet taken their roles, who have not yet stepped into view. The future collapses onto the present, not like water spilling from a glass, but in reverse, as it flows back into the overturned vessel. The new order forming from chaos, like the first life which stepped onto Earth and made real the numerous and eternal forms of being. Everything is in motion, not just the cells in my body. No, not just the winds and the seas. All that is will cease to be. The Earth itself is a mortal organism. The sun, an ongoing chemical reaction. It will one day implode. Its energy will dissipate. All of us, all of our knowledge, all of our history, every archive will be swept away to nothing. Even God may one day vanish. We do not know from where we came, what brought our solar system into being. The separation of Earth from other planets, the separation of heaven and earth. These vast oceans, This shell we call atmosphere, with bathes, all living beings. The rock, the magma, the storms and fires, that which carved the base for this green cradle, on which Adam and Eve first set foot. Mankind has come far, yet always our advancements are used against us. We mastered iron, but soon swords came to dominate us and slash us apart. Soon, guns came to blast away the flesh of disobedient slaves. The plane, bringing us into the sky, has obliterated millions of innocent lives at the hands of a genocidal empire. The process of fission creates nuclear power, yet it may be the demise of humanity. Mankind's splitting and fusing of the atom has made wider the gap between heaven and earth. Yet, try as they may, the master has never fully conquered the slave. Man has never truly mastered man. As certain as my own mortality, so too can it be scientifically proven that the Empire will lose its grip on the Earth. The last generation of imperialists is demented. They have sacrificed their humanity to a great and sinister plan which is bound to fail. If you control the mind, you control the man. Yet, they cannot control our minds. The television hypnotizes, it sedates, but we can turn it off. The internet tracks us, shapes our behavior, yet it is nothing but a medium, a protocol, subject to the intervention of individual users. And so, we exploit this for as long as we can. I am one of many. I am not special or unique. You too can be heard. You must be heard while it is still possible. The Empire has lost all humanity. It cannot respect our drive for freedom, for a positive vision of the future. We still have our humanity, and the Empire does not. We cannot fight this sociopathic empire with hugs and kisses, poems, or prayers. No. We must augment our humanity with the forces that dominate us, like how my microphone beams this message potentially to thousands, to millions. Seize the power which dominates us. The means of production, the weapons of destruction. Seize them and do what must be done. This is the destiny of the great forsaken masses. Not to lay down, not to be consumed by opiates, not to pray with your back against the wall. If our enemy has become reptilian, cold, sociopathic, then we can no longer forgive them. Our empathy cannot extend to them. Those who are too weak to fight shall stand behind us. Let them pray for our success. All that we know, all that we love, it will one day vanish. But the moment, the life we have, it's all that we have, and we must protect it with everything. Love and war, bonding and protection, they're one and the same. Hearing this prophecy, you may not believe me. You may wonder why things could not just be simple, predictable. This void you call the future, you resist filling it. The mind, it is naturally lazy. It refuses to accept the inevitable. Yet, it is the nature of the mind to speculate. Be ready. Be ready. Be ready. I cannot burden you further. I have a war to attend to.
Hello. Hello, everybody. So, just a normal stream today, no big deal. So I want everybody who's watching to share the stream where you can. Okay, if you want to see me in higher quality, higher production value, donate to my Cash App. That is 44100HZ. I'm at $15 out of $200 that I want for better equipment. Actually, I should raise that number to $300 because I am running out of disk space. But being as it is, I'm going to leave it there for now. And if you like what we're doing here, and you want to join our fight to rebuild America, right, and to institute policies to create a socialist economy, donate to CPI. That is Cash App CPI Events. And that is going to help us to organize a conference in Chicago. That is an event at the Hyatt Regency, August 6th in Deerfield, Illinois. That event will be featuring Garland Nixon, Dan Kovalik, Nick Brana, as well as Dust James. And please feel free to check out my Discord, okay? I will link that in just a second here. And with that, we will begin my stream, okay? So, here's that Discord. Wait, is that right? That's it, okay. It's a Discord. So, yes, welcome to the first hour of Bismuth's stream. We spend our first hour or so covering news and events, and the second hour is variety. Today, in our very serious second hour, we have Charlotte Forrester of CPI. She's going to come on and explain the surprising origin of mass shootings. All right, and I am going to go right into the news. This first thing is not exactly news, but I thought that it was interesting because last stream I labeled the farmers in the Netherlands who are currently revolting against climate regulation as petty bourgeois, who are losing their status as petty bourgeois. And Haas of Infrared has a different view, and I thought that I would like to play his perspective.
Right. So when people call farmers petite bourgeois because they own their own means of production, they're neglecting the most important aspect of what defines relationships to production, which is revenue, okay? And farmers, in terms of their relation to the streams of revenue is concerned, are primarily concerned with subsistence of their current conditions of production, as well as paying rents. This is what no one pays attention to. Because remember, Marx developed this Trinity formula: capital, wages, and rents, right? And for Marx, rents, the category of rents was belonging to the landowner and then to the financial capitalist, because the landowner uses their land to as a source of security and leverage, which banks then leverage to give out loans. And there you go. It's the origin of fucking financial aristocracy.
Valorization is almost as bad a translation.
So, in this analysis, Haas is saying basically that Marx's analysis of the petty bourgeoisie was made in the time when there was not a financial aristocracy, right? So what he's saying is that now there's a class of financiers whose existence is based on extracting land rent and rent on machines from farmers, this kind of thing, right? So I'm not sure if I fully understand this comparison, right? I'm not sure if I entirely agree with it, but I do think that it's an interesting view, and a few other thinkers I know share this view. For example, Yanis Varoufakis calls what we live in neo-feudalism, right? But I thought that this was a thought-provoking perspective, and maybe he's onto something. Maybe we need new terms to describe these farmers other than petty bourgeoisie. But what I will say is, even if you believe that these are sort of these small capitalists, right? Now, if you're watching this, you're not a Marxist, you're going, what the hell are you talking about? Well, here's the bottom line. For me, the fundamental aspect is that we can see the contradiction is between the farmers and the establishment and their agenda, right? And so regardless of whatever label that we choose to give these farmers, we know what's going on, right? And we know that these people are different than the oh-so-enlightened reactionary small business owners in America, for example, begging for crumbs from investors so they can run their pseudo-moralistic businesses, pandering to liberal sentiments, right? Or people who own, for example, I own this like mini Amazon Waypoint, or I own, this kind of thing. I would also like to point out, interestingly, that the Dutch word for farmer, boer, that's B-O-E-R, is the same as their word for peasant. So, maybe to the Dutch, the farmers are peasants, as revealed by their use of language, right? And just like the peasant uprisings of old, there is both a reactionary and a progressive character to this, because it's reactionary in wanting to preserve or reinstate the old way of things, the old position that these farmers could secure, right? But it's progressive because the direction of the farmers' anger is people who are either workers or maybe neo-peasants or small, capitalists, whatever you want to call them. They are going against the big capitalists, the big capitalists. The biggest ones are the ones pushing this agenda of degrowth and automation. They don't want to have to manage the surplus population. Farmers producing less food means less people, right? So it is progressive in the fact that it wants to overturn this huge and powerful reactionary class with its tentacles all across the globe, compared to this small set of farmers who are just trying to fight for their own, right? So a smart tactician will know this, and they'll see this and say, well, regardless of even whatever ideology these farmers have, unless they're outright Nazi or something like this, then we should support them, right? Tactically speaking, we should support them. And I know, okay, if you're watching this, you're probably in America, right? Well, things like this are going to happen in America, and we're going to see the exact same things happening. And, Dostoevsky is asking, is the WEF actually behind all this? And, well, the EU is what is behind these regulations. The Netherlands have actually been behind the EU regulations, and now this is their catching up, right? So you kind of know who's running the EU, more or less. Well, anyway, and, I don't completely rule out the fact that this could be genuine ecological concern of some kind, but I would really like to know how the nitrogen that's going to these farmers actually affects the environment, right? It's a little bit unsure about that one, right? But a smart tactician will not be arguing, I must know the class of these people, and I must define it within a pre-existing ideological framework, this solidified notion of Marxism, which is eternal, right? That's completely the opposite of Marxism. That is a metaphysical interpretation. No, you don't have to identify them with a particular class to know the right approach to the situation. Not saying that an analysis of their material interests and class interests couldn't be helpful in this situation, but that's what tacticians should be doing, not arguing about how they fit into this sort of old dead version of the Marxist ideology, which by nature of its dialectical it's a dialectical ideology. It stays fresh. It sheds its vestiges. The things that are no longer relevant are either forgotten or maybe they become relevant in the future, but they're not currently relevant. And Marxism has to stay fresh. It has to stay young. We shouldn't be splitting over how we label a particular group or movement. So, moving on.
Support.
Here is Jackson Hinkle, who is this amazing streamer. I'm sure that you know about Jackson Hinkle, right? And very, very sad news from him. I'm just going to let him speak for himself here.
Unfortunately, we were suspended for the past 7 days, but that's not the main story here. Okay, so keep watching because it gets even worse. On the 4th or 5th day of my suspension, I don't really remember, because I was just so shocked, and I still am so shocked as to this news. I got a second email from the TOS, the Terms of Service Community Guidelines team at YouTube. Now, who are these people? We don't know who these people are. Sometimes they say a video is okay to be on YouTube, and then the next day they'll switch and say it's not okay to be on YouTube, and they'll take it down. I would imagine these are the sorts of people who graduate from Boston College or Yale. They have pink or blue hair, and they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and now they live in Silicon Valley, where they dictate for the rest of the entire nation what acceptable or unacceptable speech is. Well, I got a second email from them. This email, with a harsher tone, notified me that I had been permanently demonetized on YouTube. This means no super chats. This means no super thanks under any of my videos. This means no ad revenue from any of my videos. This means no memberships.
Hi, Nick.
For any of you that choose to support me through those means as well. This means I can't, raid people on YouTube anymore either, which is something that I've helped grow other people's channels with. It's a feature that is really beneficial, because we've been getting, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people watching our live streams, and then we can send them over to another streamer that has a similar, point of view as us, and we build our audiences. Okay. So, if you don't get the big picture here, that amounts for, I don't know. I'm guessing maybe like 80% of my income. Yeah. So what would you do if, all of a sudden you were doing your job, you were following all the rules of your work, and then for some reason, your boss comes in and tells you that they're gonna reduce your pay by 80%. Me, I don't know. It just pisses me off and kind of fires me up even more. Like, everyone's like, "Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just fired up to keep going even harder because, we at least still have our channel for now, right? And everyone's still watching. The only thing that we really need to change is the fact that now I don't have an income as a result of this. It's a semi-perma ban. This is what they said. They said my channel has a long history of harmful or hateful content, which if you watch me, you know how insane that is. They went on to say, my content is incendiary, demeaning, or promoting violence or hatred, especially on the basis of protected characteristics. Now, come on. We all know that this is just a catch-all that they are applying against me because I don't hold the same positions that Joe Biden holds when it comes to the war in Ukraine. I don't hold the same positions that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or George Soros hold when it comes to NATO or China, for that matter. All right? I don't hold the same position that, say a a Hillary Clinton might hold with regard to what she thinks about Donald Trump's foreign policy, right?
So, yeah. And that's exactly what it is. Not the best pause frame, sorry, Jackson. But look, this is Jackson never harassed anyone. Sure, well, especially lately, it once in a while it gets a little rowdy, but nothing beyond what would be normal. And I'm really sad to see that he is losing this revenue and losing this ability to do these things, right? And I think that this is an important moment for us to think about what is the internet, right? Yeah, here, I'll give him a better face. Ready? Let's go forwards. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so I just want to point out, right? The internet, what is the internet? The internet is they give you a line of communication, a data stream from one computer to another. That's what the internet is, right? The internet may be mostly, practically today, platforms, right? And so finding better platforms is good, right? And that may all be true, but remember what the internet is, right? The internet is not YouTube, and people will quickly realize this, like they knew this in the early 2000s. They knew this, and they forgot it because of the sort of platform monopolies, right? Which will not stay monopolies if they keep on behaving in this way. So finding better platforms is a good thing. We have, several other platforms like Rockfin, Odyssey, backed by the LBRY blockchain, as well as Rumble, and possibly others. Some people are making platforms from scratch, even, right? And we're going to end up fleeing, I think, in the long run, we're going to end up fleeing to platforms, right? Because at a certain point, they're de-algorithming you, right? They're hiding your content. They're unsubscribing people from you to the point where you actually would be getting more exposure on a separate platform that is more neutral, right? And net neutrality, it was suspended for a while, but Biden put it back into place with an executive order, but it could go away again. Why do I bring this up? Net neutrality is that your internet service provider has an obligation to provide you with a fair and equal internet service. They are not allowed to block out a website unless that website is hosting illegal content, right? So net neutrality is a very important thing, which will probably bite us in the butt in the future if net neutrality gets overturned again, right? I'll definitely be talking about that. I'll definitely be protesting that if that were to happen, right? But also, if there are laws passed banning certain types of speech or information as well, right? Now that's a very obvious violation of our First Amendment rights, but if they deem it a national security issue, we know that they can take it down wherever we put it, and this would probably, in all likelihood, push us into the dark web. But I'm very optimistic about the alternative platforms, right? Because I know that people have a hunger for what Jackson is saying. People have a hunger for information that tells them something that is a different idea than what they're hearing in the mainstream, because the mainstream has been saying the same thing for so long, and it has never made sense of things as they are. They've never been honest, right? Someone like Jackson, he is saying what he honestly believes, and what he honestly believes is very, very different than that media that I think a lot of people are sick of, they don't trust, and I think that they will try to seek out other platforms, right? So it will take a while for the cultural adaptation. You can't be a vanguard and say, everybody go use this, use that, right? I'm going to stop streaming on YouTube. But I think it's really important for us to accept that this is a very strong possibility. All right, so moving on to the next thing, I thought that this Twitter thread was a pretty good thread talking about modern day revolts which are not being reported on. Now, this one, I'm not sure where this is, but this is the Dutch protest. Okay. I mean, the images are crazy, right? They're spraying manure on government buildings. Right? Look at that. I do not condone this behavior, guys. I do not condone this behavior. They are dumping crap onto places where it does not belong. I mean, the farmers are really causing chaos as a form of protest. I mean, they do not want their country to continue operating, right? All of the red dots here are farmers' protests, apparently, which are not being covered by the media. Well, guys, if you're around in 2020, you probably know about all these Antifa riots that they were streamed online, right? But they are not. They are certainly not on television, at least not to a great extent. Dostoevsky is wondering if Neat Feet from the infrared community, if he knows what is going on in the Netherlands. That's interesting. That is interesting. Here we have riots in Ghana over the extreme inflation, which I had no idea about. Really reminds me of the yellow vests in France. I wonder who's doing that, you know. In Sri Lanka, I mean, they stormed the capital in Sri Lanka, you know, and they said they only have 1 day of fuel left. The military is defending gas stations, right? People are at their limit. People are completely at their limit. And yeah, this is them. They're storming the Capitol. Here they are in front of the presidential palace. I mean, and I guess in Chile, they also, I don't know, some anarchist crap going on. I don't know. Anyway, I do not condone this behavior, guys. I do not condone this. I don't know. This guy needs to provide more context for what's all going on. But look, there's stuff in Ecuador, people rioting over costs of food and fuel. Spanish farmers are blocking highways to protest the cost of fuel, right? So there's so much, guys. There is so much going on. It's really popping off. And, you know, this is what we were saying would happen because of the situation with Europe cutting off Russian gas. And another thing here, another situation in Europe is that the PM of Estonia resigned. And you can guess why. It has to do with the tug of war going on between, right? Well, let's read. So first, her party fractured, her coalition fractured over the push to make all elementary education in Estonian only. Right? So Estonia is right next to Russia. It's really good for Estonians to know Russian, right? But they have this agenda to cut off from Russia. But that's a very, very painful thing to do, to cut off from Russia, right? So, yeah, that is one issue that they debated over. Another issue was over family and energy subsidies, with their energy prices skyrocketing due to the EU embargoes against Russia, right? And this is after the January resignation of the previous prime minister, right? So the one that, I believe the one that just resigned, she's the first ever female prime minister, so she indicates her. It's a bit ambiguous writing, but she has been a vocal advocate of anti-Russian sanctions, and she had to step down. Well, I'm just guessing it has something to do with how these sanctions actually affect the condition of the people in Estonia, right? Because so many of these things going on in Europe right now, they could be completely quelled. There would be no problem if they simply decided to trade with Russia, right? And, this is in addition, right? Yesterday, this happened yesterday, the same day that Boris Johnson resigned due to scandal, and the same day that Shinzo Abe, the PM of Japan, was assassinated, right? So we have leaders falling all over the place, not just Europe, right? We have to remember, it's not just Europe. America, we have the same contradiction within. The contradictions that's playing out is the contradiction between the people who want to be fed and who benefit from more open trade, right? And the establishment, which has geopolitical aims to basically, have the Anglo-American establishment surround Russia and choke off Russia, right? And this contradiction is playing out between the geopolitical aims of the establishment and the needs of the people to be fed, right? This same contradiction exists in America. Our geopolitical cutting off of Russia and selling our oil and gas to Europe to try to bail out Europe, that is affecting our gas prices. It's affecting all of our prices here, right? We are a gas exporter. We have more than enough gas, but yet our prices are very high because we have to bail out Europe because of the Anglo-American geopolitical agenda. And the American people are feeling the same contradiction. And all of this, I believe, is going to fracture Europe once again, maybe not exactly like, but similar to how it was at the end of World War II. This is going to fracture Europe and fracture the world even more along the lines between the Anglo-American and Eurasian establishments, right? And to me, this is a Cold War, okay? And I say this because, to me, from what I understand, the decisive property of Cold War is that it is war between nuclear-armed great powers, meaning that these powers cannot attack each other directly, right? Neither party wants to risk being destroyed, so they war on different fronts. Economic warfare with sanctions and trade restrictions, proxy wars like Ukraine, which kind of reminds me of how we supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, information warfare, covert operations, creating color revolutions, anything but outright military conflict between major powers because of how circumstances have forced us to resort to alternative types of warfare, right? And of course, for the countries without nuclear weapons, for those outside of direct military alliances with nuclear armed powers, they still can be trampled in the old-fashioned way, like they used to be, right? We can still bomb them. We can still do all of these things. So it would actually be good for them to get nuclear power. Finally, to top off the news, I'm going to read the contents of this article from China's newspaper and TV channel, CGTN, talking about the Fed policy. They do a great job describing the Fed policy. They do have a bit of a pro-China bias, but I think most sober analysts would be accused of the same thing, right? So, will Fed policy become more favorable to the market in the second half, right? Second half of the year, that would be the months of, July through December, I believe, is what that is, right? So, this is written by Jimmy Zhu, whose opinion does not necessarily reflect the views of CGTN itself, right? So, he writes that recent falling commodity prices raise the hopes that inflation in some developed economies could peak in the second quarter. Even with that, the Fed will not likely slow down the tightening pace in the near term. Such actions may delay the recovery in the U.S. bonds and stocks, but continue. Such action may delay the recovery in U.S. bonds and stocks, but continue to support the greenback. The sharp decline in commodity prices, including oil in June, means that inflation should ease in June. Well, we don't have the numbers for June yet, but they are coming in soon. The main reason behind the commodity prices drop was mainly due to, quote, recession trades, as investors were worried that the U.S. Fed's tightening measures would ultimately drive the largest economy into recession. Such fears led to a strong dollar and a weak stock market, driving commodity prices lower. Even if the June inflation data to slow down due to drops in oil prices, it may not be sufficient to convince the Fed that inflation in the U.S. has peaked. While the oil supply is expected to remain tight in the second half of the year due to major refiners' unwillingness to boost production, crude prices are likely to reverse lower significantly. Since late 2020, U.S. inflation has fluctuated with the movement of crude oil prices. Furthermore, the resilient U.S. jobs data for June released last Friday may help clear away some of the imminent recession fears, while the unemployment rate at 3.6% offers more room for the Fed to tighten the monetary policy to put inflation under control aggressively. Against this background, the Fed is likely to raise policy rates by another 75 basis points in July, taking the policy rate to 2.25 to 2.5%, the highest level since 2018. Whether the pace of hiking will slow down from the September meeting will depend on the upcoming inflation data. We estimate that there will be another 100 BPS rate increase from September to December, setting the policy rate at around 3.5% at the end of 2022. Impact on U.S. financial markets. Some market participants are worried that there would be another sharp gain in U.S. 10-year government bond yield amid global central banks tightening after it surged 150 base percentages in the first half of the year. Based on the Fed's policy outlook, such worries may be overdone. If the prediction for the Fed's interest rate to stay around 3.5% by year-end is correct, the U.S. 10-year government bond yield shouldn't exceed 3.5% as well, which is currently trading around 3.10%. Moving into the second half, higher policy rates should start to cause a visible slowdown in the U.S. economy, which may have downward effects on some bonds. Some key economic indicators show that rate hikes have already slowed the growth activities in the second quarter. The ISM manufacturing PMI dropped 4.1 points from March to June, the largest quarterly decline since the fourth quarter of 2018. So production is dropping, right? University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index slumped to a record low level in June as higher inflation and interest rates drastically dampened consumers' outlook on the economy. People are buying much, much less. People are buying much, much less. That's why, despite the declining production as a result of rate hikes, the prices are not going insane because people are making up for it by buying less, buying much, much less. Ever since the start of 2020, we have been buying very, very little. If both manufacturing and consumption activities lose steam, the 10-year U.S. bond yield, which tends to track the growth outlook, will find it difficult to climb higher. Our base case scenario is that the 10-year U.S. bond yield may trade in the 2.9 to 3.4% range in the second half of the year. Bond yield, right? That's the interest rate on bonds, and that's going to reflect economic growth. In the past 12 months, U.S. stocks have been tracking the movement of the 10-year government bond yield, as higher bond yields tend to pressure the stock price lower. The correlation between the yield on the 10-year U.S. government bond and the S&P 500 has been at minus 64 since June of last year. If the prediction of no huge gains in bond yields in the year's second half is correct, the worst-selling U.S. stocks could be over. However, we expect the stock market to remain volatile in the third quarter, mainly due to the uncertainty of upcoming earnings reports and the Fed's tightening policy. The U.S. second quarter earnings report will be kicking off this week. In the past 2 years, resilient earnings have been one of the important factors driving the stock market higher. However, we expect more companies to issue more negative outlooks this time around as demand slows and prices rise. In addition, market participants are still unsure whether inflation has peaked and how aggressive the Fed will be. The FOMC meeting in July, the Jackson Hole meeting in August, and the FOMC meeting in September are all big events for the stock market with huge uncertainties. Until these uncertainties become clearer, investors will become more confident. Regarding the US dollar, we expect the currency to remain strong in the third quarter. The Fed will still be one of the most hawkish central banks in the coming months, and no other major central bank can match its tightening pace. Such an outlook would continue to support the dollar. In Europe, its rate hike pace should be very gradual in the second half, even with its red-hot inflation, as the ECB would continue to pay high attention to balancing the inflation fight and growth defending. In this case, the possibility of a strong euro to pressure the dollar is low. So guys, this means that Europe's inflation is going to start to be a lot less moderate. Okay, some European countries have had more or less inflation than America. Well, if this is going to be the policy, the inflation in Europe is about to pop off, right? Whereas in America, we are sacrificing more jobs, we're sacrificing more economic growth in order to curb inflation because, well, I guess that's because it's our policy. I don't know exactly why. So, opportunity in yuan-dominated assets, right? So, basically, the end of this article is going to tell you to invest in China, which, anyway, make of that what you will. All right, so that is all of the news and views that I wanted to cover for today. But I wanted to read you guys some stuff about economics because it's important. And if you don't quite understand it, then you should probably go figure out just what the hell I just read. Right? I don't completely understand all of it. I understand some of it. I like to expose you to that. So, with that, I am going to, in about 10 minutes, I am going to interview Charlotte Forrester about the surprising origin of mass shootings. So we will be back in a little bit, and I will see you guys later. Okay. Hello, hello, hello. I am here. With Charlotte Forrester of CPI. Let's get that up here on the screen. All right. And if you're watching, guys, welcome back. If you're watching, share that stream, share this stream, share it with people maybe that wouldn't normally watch it. I don't know. Get some interesting feedback. Right. And if you want to see me in higher quality, then donate to my Cash App. That is 44100HZ. I am at $15 out of $200. And if you like what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve here at CPI, then donate to the CPI Chicago conference. That is CPI events. All right. So, we have a shocking topic to cover in this second hour. So, let's introduce the one and only Charlotte Forrester. Say hello to the fans.
Hi, everyone. How are y'all doing?
All right. Charlotte.
And thank you, Sam, for having me on.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to introduce you now. Okay, Charlotte, who also goes by Char Darling, has been a member of CPI for a long time. She's an OG. According to her Twitter bio, she is a writer, poet, and pin-up model. She has written many articles which you can access on Main Trend News. That is maintrendnews, all one word, .com. Charlotte is working on an article about the surprising origin of mass shooters in America, and that is what she is going to talk about today. Do you want to introduce yourself anymore, or do you think that was good?
I think that was wonderful. And just so you know, I actually just finished my article, so you will be seeing that article printed and published tomorrow on maintrendnews.com.
Awesome. All right, with that, let's get into the questions. So, it seems that everybody today has their own theory about where all of these mass shooters are coming from. Maybe it's because of our overly relaxed gun laws. Maybe we have too many bad guys with guns and not enough good guys with guns. Maybe it's because we've strayed too far from the path of God. What do you think of these theories? Can we fix America's gun problem with any of this?
I think this is a very multifaceted problem, as this is not just caused by lax gun laws or a lack of religious faith. It is actually a combination of social isolation from each other, and as well as not only just as an increase social isolation from each other, but a lot of it has to contribute to the increasing mental health crisis in America, which Big Pharma has definitely exacerbated with the over-medication of SSRIs, which many of these mass shooters have been known to be taken.
So many people are saying that a lot of this is caused by the fact that we are allowing hate speech, or we are allowing children to play violent video games. Where do you think these shooters are really coming from? For example, the Highland shooter on 4th of July.
Well, what we know about the Highland shooter, who is also known, whose name is Robert Crimo III. He has been accused of many things, such as being a member of Antifa because of his brightly colored hair, or being a MAGA supporter because he has been spotted in pro-Trump rallies. And he's even been accused of being a QAnon conspiracy theorist. However, one of the clues that we've gotten was from a friend of his, who is known as @Cowtails on Twitter, and who has said that he's made music with him around 2015 to 2018. And if you actually read on his Twitter, he says that he's not Antifa, he's not some MAGA overlord. And I know this sounds really interesting, but it's not the truth. He's an isolated stoner who completely lost touch in reality. And what's also terrifying is that the FBI has known that he was a danger to society due to 2 previous encounters with the police in 2019.
So, do you think that the shooter was groomed into performing the shooting, as many people say?
I don't think he was exactly groomed, unlike the 2 previous shooters. But I do think this was an act of malpractice from our law enforcement. As Cremo was actually had encountered the police 2 times in 2019 when he had attempted suicide. And then later when when the police intervened again, when he had threatened to kill everyone in his family. And shockingly, the police had to confiscate 16 knives, a sword, and a dagger. And because of this arrest record, the feds knew that that this troubled youngster was a loose cannon waiting to pull the trigger. But he was able to obtain these weapons because his father is an influential businessman in Highland Park, and who also ran for mayor but lost to Nancy R. Rotering. And not to mention, his father was the one that actually sponsored him when he applied to obtain his gun license. And over the span of the 3 years, he was able to obtain 5 firearms, which includes at least 3 semi-automatic weapons, a pistol, and a shotgun.
Wow. Yeah. So, let's see. My questions didn't exactly line up with this, but it's okay. With this particular shooter, now you said this shooter was not groomed into performing the shooting, but the past 2 shooters were. So do you have more information on them?
I do indeed. One of them, who was Peyton Gendron, he was the shooter in Buffalo who shot up a crowd in a Buffalo supermarket. He was, in fact, a conspiracy theorist and was a big believer in the Great Replacement theory. And he even written a manifesto that supported the Great Replacement theory. And he had also was another case of someone who was socially isolated, looking for someone to pay attention to him. And he thought he found a friend through from someone named Armand on Discord, who has been discovered to actually been an FBI informant. And Peyton Gardron actually had previous arrest records as well. And because of this, the FBI and federal agencies can actually obtain access through people's through court records and arrest records, as well as mental health records. And this gives them, an advantage to groom into these vulnerable young men into committing domestic terrorism. Wow.
And the victims of these shootings, right? Now, what would they think about, how do you think they would react to knowing that the FBI neglected keeping weapons away from this person, allowed him to be a danger, and in the other case actually groomed the shooter? Doesn't this make you sound kind of like a conspiracy monger? How would you react to these claims?
It's a very hard question to answer because we're surrounded by so many conspiracies as it is. For instance, 9/11 is often claimed to be an inside job, although there is evidence that the Bush administration during that time knew ahead of time that these terrorists who originate from Saudi Arabia was going to attack the Twin Towers. And and for those who are calling, for more gun control, there are so many loopholes that are going to be exploited anyway, especially since we have a heavily militarized police force, and it needs to be stressed that 40% of domestic abusers are police officers themselves.
Absolutely. Wow. And my first reaction when I heard about someone from the FBI talking to a shooter was, okay, well, they're probably there just to spy on them, right? Just to collect information about this person, I thought, shouldn't we trust our government to do the right thing, right? But that this was not the case, right? Can you explain why this is not the case?
Because our government has an incentive and an agenda to further divide our country into distrusting each other, and this gives more leeway and precedent for the state apparatus to erode our civil liberties. They need mass shootings to happen so they can justify civil liberty crackdowns, more spending on police and security, all for the sake of combating domestic terrorists and national security. This isn't unlike the January 6th riots, where there are actually people within the police that allowed the protesters or rioters to enter the Capitol. So this gave people the political elites to enact more draconian laws to increase police spending on the Washington D.C. and this is being used as a precursor to as I believe is a precursor to other draconian laws, on a federal level and not just statewide.
Wow. And why do you think that the state needs to expand its security, right? I mean, it's more or less seemingly stable right now. I mean, we've had things like January 6th, right? But why do you think that the state, I'm going to dig on this a little more, what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of?
They're afraid of a united working class. They're afraid of a united working class rising up against the political and financial elites. Because a divided country makes it easier for the ruling class to control us.
Yeah. So if all of this is true, this is a big pill to swallow for a lot of people, right? And if all this is true, then shouldn't we be doing everything that we can to protest this rampant abuse of the people of this country? Shouldn't we be spreading the word far and wide about the origin of these mass shootings and trying to unite people and show them how they're being violently divided, right? Shouldn't we go and spread this message as far as we can?
Absolutely. And not only that, but I think we need to start learning to trust each other again, because we are social creatures, and I think it's a very unnatural for us, to be so distrusting on such an unprecedented level in the 21st century. And not only that, but even accept differences and like certain oddities and quirks, that are otherwise harmless, and also other political ideologies and beliefs, because right now the left is divided amongst themselves, all for the sake of ideological purity, and this is something that's been cultivated by NGOs and dare I say it, George Soros.
Right, George Soros. Look, that is not an anti-Semitic talking point. George Soros is responsible for lots and lots of money going towards creating free trade agreements, which ultimately benefit the Anglo-American empire. He represents the big monopolies, banks, the big bourgeoisie, which wants to reduce the population and automate everything. You know, they say to the average person, we don't need you anymore, right? We don't need you anymore. So
that's exactly the case it was in the late 70s and the early 80s, once the ruling class decided that the labor aristocracy was no longer needed to maintain American imperialism. And that's why we had so many of the rollbacks of the social safety nets that had been gained by labor activists and American communists during the 1930s and 40s.
So, for those of us that want to learn more about these mass shootings and their origin, right, where can we turn?
Well, I would not rely on mainstream media, because they will tell us, the solution is more gun control, or that in fact it is simply a case of mental illness run amok, when in fact people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victimized by crime than to be perpetrators themselves. And so I would suggest, first off, by looking at maintrendnews.com. I would also look at more independent news sources, such as Heartlands Media, Jimmy Dore, who, by the way, is a much more of a talented journalist than Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian combined. Sorry, not sorry. And The Gray Zone is a fantastic source, and Mint Press as well, Sputnik, and RT News. I know that sounds very nefarious, since RT is a Russian state-sponsored media. Ooh.
Well, it's my view that if you're going to listen to the American state-funded and corporate media view, then you should also listen to the foreign state-funded media, and know that all media has its own view, it has its own biases, right? But you absolutely cannot neglect one perspective simply because it's foreign to you, right? That comes from a place of xenophobia and a lack of objectivity, right? And I'm going to push back a little bit on you. This is going a bit off of the question script, if you don't mind, because I think a lot of people would say, well, how can our state be so cynical, right? How can our government believe that the only way to deal with the people is the use of more force and to allow the living conditions to degrade? How can they be, they present this such a humane image, right? And they say they're on their side. Biden tweets about the working class all the time, right? How do we know that that is just a mirage? How do we know, for example, that, they're just, in the case of these mass shootings, for example, how do we know that they're not just neglectful, right? This is a really hard question, right? But I think a lot of people still have a lot of trust in the state, right? And what would you say to somebody that believes in one of the two major parties, or believes that the American state is a force for good, law, and order?
Well, I think we've been hypnotized into believing in one party or the other, because we've seen consistently how both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have screwed over the average American over and over again. And and I think to quote James Baldwin, we are a deeply traumatized society. We've gone through so much trauma within our country, such as the Great Depression, the stock market crash, World War II, the neoliberal setbacks to our economy, and as well as the terrorist attacks within 9/11. So in the times of crisis, we look up to someone who we regard as a strong man, someone who can guide us and lead us towards the light, out of the darkness.
Right. And, to put a strong point on this, right? We are in a crisis, right? We are in a global crisis of the American system, and it is manifesting here on our soil, right? And the ruling class can respond to the crisis in two ways. Either they can attempt to improve the conditions that we're living in, or they can try to consolidate power and crack down on the American people. And if your conditions aren't getting better, you already know what they're doing, right? You already know what they're doing. So how much more time do you have, Charlotte? Do you want to talk about some other things, or do you want to go?
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely I would love to talk more, and going back to what you said about being in a crisis, capitalism breeds crisis. That's just the nature of capitalism itself. It needs these set of crises in order to maintain its system. We go through crisis after crisis after crisis. 2 years ago, we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and as a result of that, we've had a crisis of businesses being shut down, and not to mention an increase cases of mental illnesses. In fact, according to a study in the World Health Organization, COVID-19 pandemic triggered 25% of an increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression worldwide. And because our country does not have a universal health care, which would include mental health care, people in American citizens are more vulnerable to experiencing a form of mental illness.
Absolutely, right. It's I know for a lot of people, this includes me. If I spend too much time alone, then I start to get a lot of nagging and condescending and judging thoughts right in my head that build up more and more intense over time. And a lot of people experience this when they have isolation, right? And it causes you to put your aggression outwards and to hate the world when you're locked up like that, right? When you're locked in a COVID isolation, right? And with the ever increasing inflation, the ever increasing look, we've had COVID-19, which never really ended. We just got tired of it, right? It never ended. We just got tired of locking ourselves up all the time, right? And then now it's monkeypox. Like, what the hell is that, right? And there's
that
a lot.
Didn't last long, to be honest. The monkeypox, I think people have forgotten that already.
Yeah, I think they tried to scare us with that one, but didn't work, right? And you have to wonder what's next on the pipeline,
Well, I can tell you that the next crisis is going to be the food famine crisis, which is going to be worldwide. We're already seeing that, and we're already seeing a breakdown in Sri Lanka. Because, as you know, these eco-Malthusians want to either actively you're trying to decrease the standards of living, or just don't care because of their ideological purity of environmentalism, of relying on purely organic farming. And now that the Sri Lanka government was not able to keep up with the purely biological farming, the economy is shut down, and now they are facing a systemic and societal breakdown.
Right, and just like the Ukraine, right? In Ukraine, they cannot use that land to farm so much because of the war. And in Russia, right, they stopped exporting fertilizer. So we have a massive fertilizer crisis in addition to this eco agenda, this eco degrowth agenda, right? And all this put together, it's putting us through crises, right? And what's interesting to me is that this is in addition to the capitalist crisis of overproduction as a result of the fourth industrial revolution. More and more jobs are being automated away over time, right? And if we raise the wages, like you want to raise minimum wage, people talk about this. Well, when you raise the minimum wage, all of the sudden machine labor becomes much more affordable than human labor. So, and I think that's actually why wages haven't gone up, simply because this automation, this wave of automation would come in and displace even more workers. And
Exactly.
And in addition to this, when this happens, we understand how capitalism works, right? So when a company is the only company that can produce something, or if they're operating in a cartel, they can extract monopoly rent, right? So they can extract extra money because they own the product or they own the service that's giving everyone the product, right? But in many cases, that does not last, or it does not work because the smaller companies can compete, or because there is no such monopoly, right? And in those cases, automation reduces the ability to profit and reduces the ability to grow. So we end up with a bunch of machines producing all of these things which nobody can afford, and nobody can operate the machines, right? So
And that's one of the unfortunate side effects of capitalism, is that the laborer cannot afford this, cannot afford the product that he or she has produced.
Right. And so this inevitable falling rate of profit that we have, in addition to the falling American unipolar order, which has sustained our country despite these capitalist crises, and has allowed us to have more or less of a welfare state, which is gradually resolved, that is going to vanish, right? And the ruling class aims to solve this problem through crackdowns. And this, we believe, this is the fundamental reason why there are more and more mass shootings. This is the fundamental reason why. Because instead of trying to rebuild the economy, the capitalist class doesn't want to be responsible for workers. They don't want to fight against the monopolies that fund them, the monopolies which they come from, the military-industrial complex which they come from, right? They don't want to fight against it, and very few people are brave enough to stand up to them. Those that do oftentimes are struck down the moment they gain any sort of popularity, right? So this is why, and this is exactly why we're here in CPI, right? Because we believe in a 4-point program that can rebuild America. And we believe that it's possible to rebuild America instead of having us fall deeper and deeper into what is essentially fascism, right?
I wouldn't even call it fascism, but rather just straight up barbarism. And a lot of people who are looking who are looking at these mass shooters as these future fascist, these super soldiers of a future fascistic a society. I think they're more likely just being groomed and fostered into barbarous gangsters in a balkanized America. And
I also think it's interesting, I haven't dug enough into this history, right? But it is interesting to me how this is similar to the aims of Project MK Ultra, right? Which was designed to create people that you could tell to carry out a particular objective. This was part of their program, programming people to carry out a particular objective that is set out for them, be at a certain place in time and do this, right? Well, by grooming individual citizens to do shootings, right? Then the government's hands are clean, right? There's no evidence, at least except for people like us who dig into the truth, right? But there's no evidence directly that they're responsible in some way or another. They exacerbate the existing conditions, right? They split things along existing contradictions. They take people that are already upset and they push them to do their own bidding.
And this makes it easier for industries such as the big pharma to over medicate people who are mentally vulnerable with SSRIs and even some of these mass shooters and that's not limiting to the past three mass shooters in the past 3 months or so. They've been prescribed with some SSRIs and even like these SSRIs or antidepressants can be dangerous, especially when you have been become so physically and chemically dependent on them. All of a sudden, you're no longer able to afford them, or your doctor who has been prescribing you these medications no longer takes your insurance, and you have to find another doctor, which can take a long time to find, especially if the doctor that does to take insurance is out of your area. And this can be a very dangerous combination for someone whose life circumstances leaves them no choice but to commit a life of crime in order to support themselves, or for someone who's been looking for attention. They become so hardened in self-isolation that they've got nothing to lose. So the only way to gain attention is to commit a mass shooting. And what's actually kind of interesting was a research done conducted by Cambridge and Oxford that they've done on these grasshoppers who are otherwise gregarious, who have been their brains have been exposed to SSRIs, and because of this, their brain chemistry their behaviors have been transformed from then to these harmless critters to a swarm of locusts. And grasshoppers are actually related to locusts, and this is not unlike the behaviors of people who have grown up, slightly eccentric, but have been medicated by psychiatrists because they simply cannot conform to society, and many of them who and not all of them, by the way, because this is not to say that people who take SSRIs are going to grow up into these murderous thugs. That's not always the case, but right. But this does increase the chances of committing to a life of crime and even domestic terrorism.
Right. So SSRI, that stands for a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which means that whatever existing serotonin your brain would produce is absorbed more slowly. So you get more and more serotonin in your brain, right? And serotonin is in many ways responsible for energy, right? So it's not the only one, but it is in many ways responsible for this, right? I mean, if you have too much, you can fall asleep, but this is messing with a person's brain chemistry, and we don't necessarily know what we're going to do. It could help them, but it could also cause these problems, right? Do you think that there is any sort of conspiracy with the medical industry prescribing SSRIs in particular?
I haven't looked deeply into it, but I think it's very much a possibility. And I also think it is another example of medical malpractice. And this is what happens when when our healthcare system has a profit motive than having a healthcare system that is used for societal good.
Yeah. And it's interesting, how much of this is simply that they would rather give you a pill than have to take care of whatever problem that you have, whatever you're worrying about. I mean, I've read one or two manifestos of these shooters, and oftentimes it surprises me because they will bring up something like, actually, I want universal health care, right? Or actually, I just want the best for the American people. I want the best for myself, right? These are people who have something missing in their life. There's something wrong, and they start to go down the wrong road when they would have otherwise been a peaceful person who actually could fight for justice and good in this world.
Exactly. And as I was researching for the article I was writing, I came across this op-ed piece in the New York Times by David Brooks, Why Mass Shooters Do the Evil They Do. And what he finds is that, like, a lot of the mass shooters are not necessarily loners themselves, or they don't want to be, or they don't strive to be loners, but they're what he would call a failed joiner. Meaning that if you fail to join a crowd, or if you fail to conform to societal standards, you would find yourself into forced solitude because because no one is willing to listen to you or look in you in the eye and say that you are enough.
And this is true. A lot of people, today we have a lot of difficult truths, right? We have a lot of difficult truths. And I know I personally have gotten too political at times with friends and family of mine and pushed them away for a while until I went back to, okay, let's just enjoy ourselves, right? But, it's easy to become obsessed with a lot of these things going on, and it's easy to push people away and become more isolated as well, I think.
And and also in that article that I read, in the last in a few last paragraphs, he talks about a column that was written by someone named Tom Junand in the Esquire during 2014. And Junand, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I'm sorry if I'm not, but he interviewed a young man whose prosecutor said he set out to commit a mass shooting, but was caught before he was able to get started. And when he got out of prison, he looked at his old high school yearbook and was shocked to find that the fellow students have signed it and that people were trying to reach out to him, but he was too self-involved to see that. And when he was out to commit the shooting, it felt like a painful duty to him. He did not want to do this himself. This is just something he felt he had to do in order to receive attention, in order for someone to pay attention to him in a world that ignored him. And this is also very troubling because Pete Gendron himself, the shooter from Buffalo, was actually expressing this doubt towards Armand, the FBI informant on Discord, that he didn't want to do this. He just wanted to give up and kill himself, or he just didn't have the strength to do this. But instead of hearing the things that something like, you don't have to do this.
Oh, hello,
you
Caleb.
Are enough. What?
Oh,
hi,
Caleb's
Caleb.
here.
How are you doing?
But let's keep going, though.
Yes. Going back to what I was saying, what Gandron really wanted to hear was that from his supposed friend on Discord was that you don't have to do this. You are enough. You are valid and you are loved. And that is the number one that is the one definition of human existentialism, is the validation of our existence.
Right. And that's, this is really interesting because if you want to stop mass shootings, reach out to that weird kid, reach out to that isolated friend, reach out to somebody who you think, you know, maybe cut off and isolated, because, you know, you could heal. You know, I mean, people, sometimes it's hard, you know, a lot of times you talk to someone and they just dump everything on you. You know, it's like a truckload because nobody's been talking to them. You know, they just keep on dumping and they make it difficult. But if you talk to them and allow them to do this, then, you know, what you've done is actually saved this person, right? You've actually saved them. And
not only saved them, but potentially saved an entire community. And let's face it, in America, good therapy is not only hard to find, but unaffordable.
Well, I'll tell you, I went to therapy, and after I dealt with some of my own self-image problems and things like this, then she just started to help try to get me a better job, you know, and a lot of times the best thing that a therapist can do is to actually try to help you improve your material circumstances, right? Because when it comes down to it, a lot of mental illness is not caused by the person at all.
It really isn't. It's caused by the material conditions that we are surrounded with and the circumstances that is handed to us. And the mass shooters often, more often than not, they have nothing to lose. These are societal rejects that have nothing to lose. And that's why, you know, mass shootings is a very American phenomenon. We don't even have that in Canada. Like, they don't even have that in Canada, even though they have the same amount of firearms that America does. We don't have this. It's only unique to us. Not to mention that America has a gun commodity fetish.
Well, and you know, what happens to somebody when they seek out medical care and they're denied it, or they know that they can't get it, right? That tells them something, that society doesn't care about you, that you're not worth anything, right? What happens when you work 40 hours a week and you have to give most of your money to the landlord? You're barely scraping by. That's like society's telling you, you don't deserve anything extra. You don't deserve to treat yourself, right? And so these difficult economic conditions are completely inseparable. Not like universities, you know, they don't want to acknowledge that politics, economy, and sociology are all completely tied together and unified. They want to separate them into disparate fields because they don't want to realize these things that challenge our capitalist establishment.
Oh my goodness, yes, and it's become like, you know, a customized reality. And Peter Coffin's book, A Custom Reality, is on my reading list. So I actually want to look further into that when researching for my book on the American mental health crisis.
Isn't that called A Custom Reality and You? Is that the title?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would love to interview Peter Coffin sometime in the future, actually. Yeah, they're a great voice on the left. And I'm tired of people judging them for being non-binary or having blue hair when the message is worth so much more than any sort of surface level judgment that you could make on a person.
I mean, for goodness sakes, even they are like so critical of queer theory and like all this like neo pronouns and.
Exactly. So I mean, I think that people are very too quick to judge on the surface, and maybe this comes from an internet poisoned mentality. You know, maybe people are forgetting that there's actually a human being there, right? But I do think that would be awesome to have Peter on. Was there anything more you wanted to say about their message?
I just want to say that that I love Peter and Miss ACDC. I love their content, and I highly recommend them, especially if you're coming out of BreadTube.
Definitely. And, one of the things that I think I need to work on personally is to figure out how I can be part of a pipeline from communities like BreadTube into this kind of thing, right? And reach out to people that I might not normally want to talk to. Reach out to people, maybe not for outright debate and disagreement, but, for a little bit of crosstalk, right? And get some varying perspectives. That's part of why in my interview with you today, for example, I've asked a few very difficult questions, which you've done a great job on, by the way. But I like to ask people difficult questions and try to have a bit of that interesting crosstalk going on. Moving ahead. So Charlotte, a lot of people here already know you. Someone said you're beautiful. I hope you see that message. That's Haruto said Charlotte is beautiful, by the way. Next time we'll get you on video so we can get that full experience. But yeah, moving on.
Thank you very much, Haruto. You're very beautiful as well. Even though I don't know who you look like, but I can already tell that you have a beautiful soul.
Oh, that's very sweet. So one of the things I wrote here, and I don't know if you caught it, was I was wondering if you can read us a poem. Did you see that I wrote that?
I did, and as a matter of fact, I actually have written a poem that is actually relevant to this topic. I've written this poem when I was in the 12th grade, and this was right after the Virginia Tech massacre in 2007, and this is called Campus Antichrist. And just a bit of a content warning or trigger warning. Some of the language may be very dark. I mean, this is a very dark topic as it is, but because of the language, a lot of it may come across as a little cringy, teen angsty, but
it's okay. It's okay.
I've done better since then.
We're gonna like it. It's good. It's good. You write wonderful poetry, and we're going to like it. So no need for disclaimers.
All right. Thank you, Sam. So, Campus Antichrist, in memory of the Virginia Tech massacre victims. Canto 1, Death in the Shell. You were an empty vessel, walking around with your dead eyes. There is nothing in your heart. The wires in your head were disconnected from reality. Your wires were misconnected with unnecessary hate and anguish. But when doomsday came, the wires slipped as they were too loose to hold on. And then it blew up like the 4th of July. Canto 2, Unmasked Cadaver. As I saw your face, you struck me as a drenched cadaver from the sweat of the repressed emotions you are unable to express. You are weak, helpless, mean, cold, indifferent, frightening. Once you manifested as the demon you had created, you released the greatest power to summon hell and chaos. Canto 3, Mistakes Will Happen. You revealed your intentions to harm those who only wanted you to come out of your cocoon of isolation. Big mistake. Big fucking mistake. Your act was to punish those who have committed the sins of avarice, gluttony, and lust. Yet you have committed the sins of envy, anger, pride, and wrath. But you were only human. But they were only human. You were only human. Canto 4, Silly Creations. But your creation was only in that attempt to show slapstick humor with cliched weapons and threats. Canto 5, Manifesto. Your manifesto was just a bad poem that displayed the grotesque result of a nightmare. How dare they compare thyself to an innocent who died for mankind's sins? You are not a martyr. You're the false messiah who had awakened my inner demons. Your day of destruction has cruelly reminded me of befriending the demon who is against my kind. You deceived me as a loyal companion with your rants, guns, and skinned head. You bastard, you tainted the name of the quiet spirits whose intentions are unknown. Canto 6, Redemption. I just hope God is merciful enough to chain you to a throne, looking through the window that shows the lives you have taken, resting peacefully in paradise, while you suffer alone in your own worst hell. And there you go. My poem from the 12th grade.
Oh, it's from 12th grade. Well, it sounds very mature for someone from 12th grade. Definitely. Wow. That really captures the way that I felt seeing when I didn't know about shooters, and when I first learned about them, that encompasses how I felt about them. Those awful bastards, awful. And, that, I think that, I remember actually in 12th grade, it was, I'm the last, I guess I'm the first actually generation to have a school shooting drill. So in my 12th grade, we had school shooting drills, and everybody younger than me has had at least 1 year of school shooting drills. And they even do this in middle schools now. And I heard maybe even younger. So you can just imagine that the consciousness of that poem really resonates, really represents how all Americans, especially young Americans, are feeling right now.
I've actually the writing style was partially inspired by Sylvia Plath, because I grew up, reading Sylvia Plath's poetry throughout high school, and the way I broke down the poem into cantos, I was partially inspired by the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. I was a huge horror buff back then, so I liked reading and consuming, quote unquote demonic entertainment or like devilish humor. And Dante's Inferno was kind of like my first introduction to classic literature.
Yeah. And you read us a poem at the CPI retreat as well, which you wrote right before you read it, actually. Yeah, and that was wonderful to see. So, I think that Dostoevsky also is an admirer of Plath, it seems. Yeah. So I think that moving on from the poetry, unless there's something else you wanted to bring up there, I know a lot of people know you've been involved with CPI for a long time, right? And I was wondering...
That is correct.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell the story of how you started to get involved with CPI.
Actually resulted and so a long political ideological journey from being a basic social liberal to a democratic socialist, and through DSA I actually met Joe Gale, who many know as Joe the Red, through a DSA event, and through him I went to one of Caleb's classes in New York City, and this class is called Neoliberalism: the Origins of Evil. And what I got out of that class was optimism, and then after watching Caleb's videos, I just knew that Caleb was very consistent and very sincere, and meeting him again in person, he was just one of the nicest, sweetest people you'll ever meet. And it's just really really funny how people get like the wrong impression of him just right off the bat because he doesn't really talk the woke language, even though he's like actually a lot nicer and kinder than the most woke people that in these PMC DSA circles.
Oh, believe me, I know that well.
And in 2020, Caleb actually invited me to join CPI, and ever since, going to the meetings, the web calls, and participate in the web conferences, and just being inspired by the optimistic message of bringing socialism to America, and that we can still be patriotic and still call out the evils of U.S. imperialism. I was ready to commit to being part of Center for Political Innovation, as well as being part of Students for Youth and Students and Youth for a New America, which you can join through the CPI website, which I will connect, which I will share in the link in the chat below. Let me just get it up. Sorry about that. My computer is very slow.
That's all right. Yeah, actually, I see earlier in the stream, Max the Sax, who's, I believe, is he the leader of SYNA? Is that right? Or...
Yes, he is the national leader. He is the national president of SINA. And if you look at the chat in the live chat box, you'll see a link to join SINA. So if you are of high school age to college age, and if you are like the ages of 17 to 25, and you want to see socialism come to America in our lifetime, I highly urge you to join the Students of Youth for New America, which you could join at the link in the live chat right to the side.
Yes, I believe, actually in this case, probably not get a ton of people. I noticed my age demographics tend to be, actually, I'm at the bottom of my own age demographic. 25 is the lowest age generally of people watching, but it's good to keep aware of that if you know anybody. I mean, if you are, of course, younger, but if you know anybody that's younger and wants to get involved, it's so crucial and so important to talk to young people and get them aware of this stuff from a young age. That's how you get people that are really understand it, intelligence on a very raw level, the IQ measure actually peaks at age 14. So educating people that are younger is extremely crucial, right? And it's something that SYNA does, I believe.
Yes, it does, and we do tabling and canvassing in college campuses, and we also educate classmates of socialism and the progressive side of U.S. history, and just a side note, the IQ being the highest or potential highest IQ being at 14. If you feel yourself, not to have a quote-unquote high IQ, do not feel discouraged. IQ tests are pure bullshit anyway.
Oh, yes. They only measure a sort of raw visual computational intelligence, which obviously some brains are highly specialized for this, and some are a lot smarter at doing other things than trying to flip a 3D object, so, or something like that,
And it doesn't take into account of the many types of intelligences.
Right. That's you've got a whole brain no matter what, right? And for some people, they've got a wonderful personality and intuitive understanding of people, right? And for them, they're also highly valuable, and they can learn so much about the different people and movements in politics, whereas someone who's more nerdy and IQ oriented, maybe they can set up websites, or they can, you know, do economics, you know, different. Everybody's made to fit in a different way, and that's a wonderful thing. I guess, is that your complete story of how you joined CPI and SYNA?
Pretty much. I mean, it's not a complete story because, you know, of the time constraints of your show, but when it comes to CPI, yes, it is.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, the people with a strong personality are good organizers and good at speaking to people, mobilizing people, working with people, right? Not just studying historical movements. You know, we're not just trying to collect a bunch of old knowledge here, you know, and debate history. We're trying to get things done. We are trying to get things done. Yeah.
We're trying to create history.
Yeah, we are trying to create history. Now, I have some questions here about your identity as an autistic person and as a trans woman. And I was wondering if these play into your interest in socialism, and how that, you know, I'll let you talk about it.
Well, as a woman of both trans and autistic experience, I think socialist America would be more beneficial to people on the autistic spectrum, because not only will we have much more easy access for services, we will also be fostering a society that will be eventually become more patient with us, that would allow us to hone our natural talents, as well as, you know, be able to give us more room to navigate a more neurotypical world that would enable us, you know, to be more trusting of each other, and as well as, you know, to cultivate, you know, talents that we haven't known to have, that we didn't know to, that was within our own selves.
Right.
And
right. And this is, you know, this is like the way that our society works. It's looking for a certain mold to rise to the top. And that type of mold is who's going to gain the power, right? And it's like the con men and the greedy sociopaths and the people that are, you know, have this ambition and hunger and drive to them to just, you know, take over, you know, and that a lot of autistic people are more interested in studying particular things, right? Learning the truth, and trying to study things, study categories of information. They're more objective thinkers. You know, they might end up being computer programmers or something. But not everybody
Not
with
me.
autism wants to be a computer programmer, right? Not you.
It's certainly not the case with me.
Right. It's everyone with autism is different, of course. But the point I'm making is just that, like, there's a certain type of mold, a certain type of expectation. And what you're trying to say, I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to say, right? So how will socialism help to deal with the problems that autistic people face? That's my question.
I think the biggest issue the autistic people face, and I think even those who are very high functioning are still considered disabled, because we are sincere, and we rely on sincerity within a society that incentivizes the people within that society to be insincere and disingenuous in order to be more ready to be cutthroat and step on each other in order to get ahead. And that's just and that is just the nature of capitalism, is a cutthroat society, and just to, you know, claw our way onto the top of the food chain. And in a socialist America, sincerity would be more prevalent, as we need to be more sincere in order for everyone to trust each other. And the more we're able to trust each other, the more likely we are able to work together and rebuild towns and communities have been deindustrialized by imperialist forces within our country. Especially that's been manufacturing jobs that have been affected by NAFTA.
Yeah, it's certainly true, right? That honesty is so valuable, but when you're honest in a tough society, when you're honest in a world gone wrong, people don't want you around. They're looking for that cope, they're looking to, proverbially, they're looking to go to the bar and have a drink and laugh about it, as opposed to face it head on and solve the things facing them, because they are so big, and it can often feel like the world is against you. It makes you feel small, and it makes you wonder if you're going to survive. Am I going to make it? Is there room for me here in this world? And I think that also can be how trans people feel as well.
It's certainly, I guess I've actually been able to, I think like when it comes to for me being trans, it's a bit mixed because the LGBT people I've actually found in America is more, people are more willing to accept LGBT people than they are of people who are disabled, especially for those who are mentally or socially disabled. Because unfortunately the LGBT community is much more commodifiable than a disability.
That's true. And yeah, it's interesting. I've heard people talk about the commodification of identity, as something which, it's funny to me, that this critical theory which talks about is against the commodification of identity, right, and says that it's excluding people who vary and people who don't fit in, but instead it's actually multiplying the brand categories and multiplying the commodification of identity. I think that's very interesting to me, and I can't help but wonder if the same will happen with autism, where we will have things that are marketed to autistic people,
God, I hope not. I really hope not, because the discourse around is going to be a shit show. And if you think the discourse around trans rights is shitty right now, oh boy, it is going to be horrendous surrounding the autistic community. Even though there's a much more material reality and basis surrounding the disability community than trans identity. And I know that's very controversial of me saying it as a trans woman, and this is very much a material reality for me. But there have been, and they have been, for thousands of years, in human civilization, of gender variation and homosexuality to be around. It's just transsexual medicalism is a very recent phenomenon, which originated in the early 20th century.
Yeah, we simply didn't have the technology before then, I guess, huh? And yeah, and then there also is, of course, the very real situation of, being able to afford treatments and surgeries, that you need as a trans person. And when healthcare is unaffordable, when you can be denied things based on insurance, then that's a very real material reality that can bring trans people to want, a better medical system.
And some of them are even forced to detransition because of that, even though they don't want to detransition. But this is not to invalidate people who have detransitioned for personal reasons, and their experiences are just as valid.
It's true, because a lot of the hysteria and groupthink around the topic has led people to have very wrong ideas about what it means to be trans. And, you know, I suppose that's a topic I could go into in my own way, but I'm a little tired and I don't want to mess it up, because it's very difficult to talk about things like this. Yeah, you know, I think that a lot of people have an approach of wanting to just openly sort of piss off left-wingers or openly piss off liberals. You know, even people that are close to me, you know, friends of mine, seem to want to just go out and say hateful things or say things that are highly socially conservative or socially reactionary in order to sort of weed them out, right? But here at CPI, and this is something I've learned, we have a much more mature approach, because we understand how doing this actually exacerbates the partisan divide. You're making the opposite mistake of somebody who makes it, for example, they're opening, you know, the first thing you say to a working class person is about some divisive issue, right? We understand that you're making the opposite mistake of the leftists, right? And that the correct approach is actually to focus on these common economic bonds that we all share.
Absolutely, and I think at the end, it really should not matter, because we, especially as we are edging closer and closer to World War III, we need to put these petty differences aside, because these differences are ultimately petty in the grand scheme of things. And if we are to survive as a species, we just gotta say to each other, listen, I don't agree with you socially or culturally on this, but I still want to be your friend. I still want to work with you, and you fucking matter to me.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that it's going to take a lot. I think, you know, I think that we're ahead of the curve, right? We have a line here at CPI which recognizes the ability of people to disagree. You know, we allow people to come in who are more like leftist or more socially reactionary, and we allow them to have their own views and to coexist even though we disagree. I know Keaton recently left, but, you know, I have more leftist views than Keaton, but we were allies and we didn't have a problem with each other over our differing views at all, right? And they want us, the establishment wants us to have a problem with each other. They want us to cancel each other over these disagreements. They want us to split with each other over these things, to sabotage organizations and to sabotage movements. And we cannot emphasize enough how badly this is going to slow the progress of actually unifying the working class, right? So important. And you know, I see the same justification coming from both sides as well, because both of them claim to represent the majority opinion. Leftists claim to represent the majority, conservatives claim to represent the majority opinion, right? And so they'll claim that they're a populist for this reason, but they fail to recognize the economic basis of the working class and the downwardly mobile small capitalists as well, who are the key, they are the key forces. And a phrase I've heard, this is something I learned from my experience in the IWW, which was lost when I entered PSL afterwards. The IWW knew that unity is forged on the picket line. And they said that you may not be able to organize a conservative worker into a union because they've been programmed to think that unions are bad. But the moment when there's an actual problem with the boss, they are some of the most likely people to stand up for their rights. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to know.
And it's very much easier to convince a conservative Trump voter who is part of the working class into socialism, or at least the programs that we are fighting for, than a PMC member of DSA or just your average shitlib who marches for reproductive rights or any other, or any other like trend that is popular within the Democratic Party.
Right. Though, I mean, it was the presence of, I believe, Joe, forget his last name, in DSA that led you to join CPI. So our presence is needed. Joe Gale, right. And his presence there is what led you to CPI. So, it's a double-edged sword. We need to remember that the core of these organizations are not our targets. We cannot hope to change them from the inside. We cannot hope to recruit broad masses from them, but by being present in them and being a voice of sanity and clarity, we can draw people towards our message.
That is right. And I am proud to be here at this moment right now.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering. I was going to ask if you have anything more to ask me.
I do not have anything more to ask except for those of us, for those watching, for anyone watching who wants to hear more of you. What is your social media so that they can go follow you? Let's hear your self promo.
Well, you could find me on YouTube right here at Shar Darling. You can also view my tweets at Darling Shar, which I will type in the chat right now.
Oddly enough, did everyone get your message in the chat? Because I don't know if I see it here. Oh, there it is. There's you are. Okay.
And you can I also have an Instagram account called Just Call Me Shar, and it's all lowercase letters, and each word has an underscore between them. I'll just type that in right now. All right, underscore. I am such a boomer when it comes to this. Okay, call me. Sorry, I am having a biting moment right now.
That's all right. This show is almost over. I'm just going to read my line. It looks like Dostoevsky left right as I was about to mod him. He was going to volunteer for mod. I think he just left, unless this is not working. But yeah, everyone follow Char Darling. Her Twitter is Darling Char. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And her Instagram is just_call_me_char_char. Both of them are pasted in the chat. You can go find them in the chat replay. And with that, I am going to do my outro. So, if you like this stream, feel free to share it. I will be streaming again on Thursday at 8:30 p.m. CST, on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. CST. Share this stream around to anybody who you think might listen to it. I hope we can be a breath of fresh air. Donate to me if you want to see me in higher quality and help me improve my production values. and that is Cash App 44100HZ. I am at $15 out of $200 for better camera, lights, and other things. And if you like what we're trying to achieve here, if you like what me and me and Charlotte were talking about today, and you agree with it, then donate to CPI. That is Cash App CPI Events. We are organizing a conference that is, find this conference info here, that is at the Hyatt Regency in Deerfield, Illinois on August 6th. It will be featuring the great Garland Nixon, as well as Dan Kovalik, Nick Brana, and Dust James. So, donate to that conference, attend that conference if you can. And if you really like what we're doing here and you want to donate some of your time and effort, join CPI. Join CPI. And with that, I will end today's stream. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we will see you next time.
And make sure you don't forget to make Dobeski into the mod.
Dostoevsky, I'm going to try a second time to mod you here right before we go. Okay. Oh, paste the channel URL of a user. Okay, we will do that. I'm gonna go to... That's inconvenient. Alright. Well, you know what? I'll figure this out another time. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye to Ware, Dostoevsky. It's hard to pronounce. I'll get used to it. The Tank Archist, to SOS USA. Goodbye to Neon Fuzz and Landrasil, Haruto, and all of the others who have not commented who are watching. And now I will play the outro. All right.